Good evening. This is a Devar Torah on Parshas Tetzaveh and is also about Shabbat Zachor. It's the second of the four special Shabbats leading up to Pesach. And this week's is dealing with the mitzvah to remember Amalek and that he must be destroyed. Now, it's very interesting that this parsha this year, these two parshas are juxtaposition, because what does Parshas Tetzaveh talk about? It's a continuation of last week's parsha, Truma, which is talking about the building of the Mishkan and the Shem's dwelling. This can be a Shem's dwelling place. And we're talking this week about lighting the menorah perpetually every night. It had to be lit from night till dawn. It's a continuing thing. There was no exceptions. And also, it talks about the special outfits that the Kohen Gadol Aaron and his sons are going to wear and when continue to and subsequent generations of Kohanim priests. And what's the whole purpose? To have a proper dwelling place for Hashem. And what's tied up in and tied into these mitzvahs and these parshas also is the concept of Torah and mitzvahs, that we should be deeply connected to Hashem. Every word of Torah we learn and every mitzvah we do makes a greater connection to Hashem, so we can get closer to Him. This is also representing light, as we'll explain. What is the Yetzer Hara? And Amalek represents denial of God, darkness, Yetzer Hara, the opposite. Now, it's interesting to note that in Parshas Tetzaveh, it starts with a command, Ata tziva Tetzaveh el bnei Yisrael v'yiko alecha shemen zayit zak ketis b'ma'or la'ala ner tamid. It says, now you should command the children of Israel that they take for you pure olive oil pressed for illumination, to kindle a lamp continually. This has to be done continually. And then goes on next week. Ba'ohel mo'ed mechutz leparachet asher al edus arachat sol Aaron and banav ma'arav ad boker lifnei Hashem hukat olam deratam me'ed b'nei Israel. That Aaron and his in the tent of meeting outside the petition, and that is near the testimonial tablets, Aaron and his son shall arrange from it evening into morning before Hashem, an eternal degree for their generations, for the children of Israel. Light represents purity, represents positivity. And the parsha then goes on to discuss purification of the sanctuary and preparing Aaron and his sons to serve Hashem in the Mishkan. And the rules of that, and it ends with talking about making an altar for making incense. But what's very interesting here is a precursor of the perpetual service, as long as it was Mishkan, later Beis Hamikdash, in the temple. And it talks about the 7 days dedication that's going to be happening. Now, that concept is extended in Parashat Tetzaveh and Sefer Vayikra, where it says, Eish tamid toked al mizbeach lo kiber. A permanent fire should remain a flame on the altar when they make the sacrifices. It shall not be extinguished. Again, you have this concept of perpetuity of a fire, another form of light. Torah's when Torah is understood as water, it's also understood as Aish. That's beyond this part the Bar Torah to explain in greater detail, but it's a fundamental. And this again represents positivity. Now, on this pasuk, it says, "Ish tamid toked al mizbeach lo kibel." A permanent light, it shall not be extinguished. It can be read, however, it has another meaning. What can be extinguished? Him. It's read as lo, tibeh, which means he, it, the flame should not be extinguished. But it has another meaning. If you, that's how it's pronounced. How it's written is lo, lamed. That's lamed vav, lamed aleph. It's written actually in the Torah, pronounced it differently. It can mean, this is something that the Alter Rav of Chabad, the Balatanya, wrote based on his teacher, that you can read it, can also be read as the no should be extinguished. All negativity, all negative shall be extinguished. And again, it gets into this concept of looking into and expanding Kedusha. Now, I want to look at Parshas Zachor, which we read before Purim, because listen, in that in Megillah Esther and the whole Purim story, there's two villains really involved. One is the most famous one, which represents Lamakites, which is Haman, but also equally evil, though Hashem ultimately works things out that he's going to be favorable to the Jews, as Achashverosh. He appeared to be simple, but was anything but, and was inherently evil. And with that, I would like to turn to Megillah Esther, which we will be reading next Yom Shishi, Thursday, starting Thursday night, around the world, even in Jerusalem, because the Megillah is read by everybody this year, because Shushan Purim comes out on Shabbat, and there's a prohibition against carrying a Megillah. So, and I'd like to look at the beginning of that portion, at that Megillah Esther, and it says, "Yehi b'mei Achashverosh, hu Achashverosh, melech Mahudu," and then melech Hodu, ad Kush sheva esrim mea medina. And it came to pass in the days of Achashverosh, hu Achashverosh, who reigned over from the Hodu 127 provinces. Now, it could have very simply taken out hu Achashverosh, and it could have said, Yimei Achashverosh, Amelech Mehodu. Then Achashverosh, the king who reigned over 127 provinces. Why do we have to say in days of Achashverosh? Why does actually two words hu Achashverosh? Now it's explained in the Perush and Remez allusion with an A, that by the Vilna Gaon, the great Torah genius in the 1700s, same time, interesting enough, living the same time as the Alter Rebbe of Chabad, Bavj, the Balatanya. And he goes into an explanation. We have to truly understand the story of Megillah Esther. Why this extra word? Who is this? What is this who referring to? And to really get that, we have to go back to the beginning of the entire Chumash, to the very famous pasuk, second pasuk, after it talks about the beginning of the creation of Hashem's creating the heavens and the earth, and pasuk 2, bet. Haaretz haisa tohu v'bohu choshek al pnei tohom and ruach elokim mefareket al pnei hamayim. In the beginning, and it says, and when the earth was astonishingly empty, with darkness upon the surface of the deep, and the divine presence hovered upon the surface of the waters. So what do we see? It's one of the many explanations is that we have the four, that those terms, tohu, v'bohu, v'choshech, al pnei tohom, represent the four exiles, which after the one in Egypt, tohu representing Bavel, bohu representing Persia, choshech representing Greece, and al pnei tohom representing Esav Edom, Rome, the final exile. Now, if you look at that final exile, that was the exile of Esav Edom, Rome. Who's Esav's angels? The one that Yaakov wrestled with. It's the Yetzer Hara. It's also known as the Malach Mavat, and the angel of death, Satan, and he wears three hats. As the Yetzer Hara deceives, tricks people into committing sins, he then goes to God and said, listen, this person is hopeless, he needs to be brought back. Then in his capacity of the Malach Mavis, the angel of death, he takes him, and when he comes to heaven, he acts as Satan, the accuser. Now, in that capacity, now, how do we connect this pasuk to this whole thing? Because if you look at the word tahom, in the word, it's spelled taf in Hebrew, taf, hey, vav, mem, sofit. If you rearrange the letters, Hebrew letters, you'll get the first letter of Hamalach Hamavet, the angel of death. And this is this angel of death, this which is the Yetzer Hara. This is the who, why it says the additional who Akashverosh. Because this who Akashverosh, he, in other words, who does he represent? He represents the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, the darkness, the very opposite of what we were talking about in this week's Parashat. And so according to the Vilna Gaon, the Gra, the whole book of Megillah Esther is talking about the battle between the Yetzer Hara and who's going to be the side of good. I'll explain in a few minutes, but how did the whole story of Megillah Esther start? King Ahasuerus, 9 years, not right before, 9 years before the events that take place in Megillah Esther, the whole 9 years before, Ahasuerus makes a party and mentions his vessels to drink out of. Now, this was a party that was going on for 6 months. And Mordecai Esther's uncle, some say husband, was telling him not to go to that party for two very different reasons. One, when the Jews went into exile, Babylonians took an exile under King Nebuchadnezzar. There was a prophecy that said, well, after 70 years we would return, but never explained when that was exactly. There's many ways of understanding and interpreting it. And Achashverosh, according to his calculations, said, hey, the 70 years had passed. So I'm going to celebrate. What does he do? He takes out the vessels of the temple and they're drinking out of them, total desecration of Hashem's honor. Then what does he do? God's honor. He also takes out the clothes of the Kohen Gadol, the ones that are described in this week's Parsha, and he wears them. Now, he should have died on the spot for doing that, but Hashem preserved them for the later miracles that appear in Megillas Esther. Now, however, now the second reason was, even though the food was completely kosher, strictly kosher, it was a place of absolute depravity, besides all the drinking and the other debauchery of that type. There were many women circulating, beautiful young women, dressed very inappropriately, who went around, and part of their worship was to try to seduce men. Jews were a great choice, into acts of immorality and worshiping their idols. And even if none of the men probably participated in it, they were wrong to be there because they did not follow the rules of the Torah of God through his representatives, this Sanhedrin, or in this case, actually, Anshe Knesset HaGadol. They did not follow their instructions and defied the Torah, and by doing that, defied God. God then said, okay, the Jewish people are going to have to be wiped out. And Eliyahu Hanavi in the next world, Eliyahu the prophet, got very concerned. He implored the four Imot, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah, to come to the aid. They all implored Hashem, even Rachel, whose tears got Hashem when they left for Babylon, to the promise that their children, he said, because of your tears, I promise that they will come back. Wouldn't listen to him. This is based on Midrashim that was taught by Rav Shlomo Brevda Zichron Tzaddik L'Bracha years ago. And what happens then? Eliyahu goes to Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. They all implore Hashem, and he says no. And that being the case, he finally goes to Moshe Rabbeinu, who was the expert at constantly praying for the Jewish people when they tested Hashem 10 times. And in next week's parsha, we're going to deal with the golden calf, which is a whole story in itself, worship of the golden calf. In any event, what happened? God said, fine, but they're going to have to earn it after what they did. And then the events of the story of Megillas Esther unwound. And it says, who's Achashverosh? It's saying, and the party is described. That was 9 years before the main events. And as the Vilna Gaon explains, he's the Yetzer Hara. So, and what does the Yetzer Hara do? Try to entrap people. You entrap the entire Jewish people. Now, who is the counter to that? Is Esther's other name was Hadass, the Gra level of Remez, illusion. explains that that is representing the Eitz Chaim, the tree of life, which is the Torah, and the whole Parsha and the whole Megillah Esther on a deeper level is the battle between right and wrong, between the Torah and truth, light and Achashverosh, who represents the Yetzer Hara. Now, where does Haman, because it is Parshas Akra, fit into all this? Well, what did happen when the Adam and Chava ate from that fruit, famous fruit? The Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination which had been externalized, went into them. And things that had become clear no longer were clear. Good and evil were all mixed up. And the Torah is the cure for that. And if we hadn't committed the sin Ekel Zahar, which we'll be talking about next week, Parsha, we would have stayed at the level where we would have fixed the mistake of Adam and Chava, gotten rid of our Yetzer Hara permanently. However, that did not happen. So we had to be taught. Now, how does the Yetzer Hara work? If somebody committed a sin and knew they were going to be instantly killed by God, they would do it. They would never do it, but there'd be no free will, no chance for us to make choices, and Hashem to reward us for making the right choices. And what does Haman represent? He represents a fake doubt. He says there is no God, there's no order of the universe, everything is happenstance. That's why he drew lots to decide which month to attack the Jews. And Haman represented that fake, which works hand in hand with the Yetzer Hara to treat people into seeing things as they aren't. So we see the original partnership of the snake, of the Yetzer Hara, combined with the death that he created from them eating, Adam and Chava eating the fruit. The same partnership exists with Achashverosh and Haman. And with this, we can also explain why do we supposed to, besides dressing up because everything was in the skies, why do we drink? Why is it one day it's a mitzvah within reason to lose our da'at, our ability to think to a certain extent? Because what happened? We had given up our ability. We had sacrificed the good for the bad by not listening to Mordechai. And if you look at it, this also explains a very famous midrash. When we were about to get to Torah, which was a few weeks ago's Parsha, Yisro, there's a midrash that said, and after that, Hashem held Har Sinai over their heads, saying, if you accept the Torah, all well and good, otherwise, that's it. Now, it doesn't make sense it could have been talking about them, because before that, when they were asked whether they wanted a Torah, the Jewish people said in unity, Nasa v'nishma, we shall do and we shall hear. They're willing to take it sight unseen, unlike the other nations when they were offered it, asked what it was, and when they were told one specific mitzvah, negative commandment, said not for us. Now, when was that warning us? That is connected to the story of Esther when not Har Sinai literally, but the change of extermination by Achashverosh and Haman was a very real thing. And that's why we took the Torah this time happily and willingly. That's why they say Yom Kippur is a day like Purim, and Yom Kippur, we're supposed to do it out of love for Hashem, but it's also a fear element. On Purim, we do it out of joy, and we sacrifice our das to show that we are accepting it, because we accepted the written Torah on Har Sinai, the oral Torah, the following of the rabbis, only true blossomed at the time of the Megillah Esther, when after having gone to the party, they're told to fast for 3 days. They do that, and Shem brings great miracles. So we're entering the period of Shabbat Zachor, in this next week's Taanis Esther and Purim. May we all truly understand these lessons and realize that nothing is random and everything that is happening in the world is part of Hashem's greater plan. And I'd like to wish everybody good Shabbos, Shabbat Shalom, and Purim Sameach.